All right, it's 7:50 here, Big 550 KTRS. R&R Sanitation Porta Potties, ladies and gentlemen. You do not want to be without a porta potty when you need a porta potty, and R&R Sanitation is the one for you to call. They are St. Louis through and through. 314-776-4000. That's the phone number. Parades, festivals, whatever it may be. Kids having a soccer game, and you're at a park, and guess what? Nature calls, and you look around for a porta potty, and you look on the sign, and it doesn't say R&R Sanitation. And you curse yourself, and you say, oh, my goodness, that's not R&R Sanitation. And then you try and hold it. And then you, right, then you try and hold it some more. And then you still don't want to go in there because you didn't bring your tetanus shot with you. Why would you put something that doesn't say R&R Sanitation on it? It's bigger. They're cleaner. They're serviced at a much more frequent basis. R&R Sanitation. So if you're in charge of ordering a porta potty, make sure you order the right one. Solve 90% of the problems right out of the gate. 314-776-4000 or rnrportabletoilets.com. Do we have Stephen Roberts?
I'm waiting for word myself here.
All right. Well, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to get into this story, and then I'm going to get halfway through the story, and then Stephen Roberts is going to join us. So let me begin to tell you the beginning of the story, and I'll finish it up on the other side of ABC News. So we know that you get your taxes on April 5th, 15th. You know that April 15th landed on a Saturday, so now it's pushed to Monday. But on Sunday, April 16th, is the Compensated Emancipation Act of April 16th, 1862. Since that falls on a Sunday, that is a holiday for Washington, D.C. Therefore, it's honored today. And so, therefore, that's why you have taxes tomorrow. Wait till I tell you the story of the Compensated Emancipation Act after the top of the hour news. Now we've got to talk to the best political analyst on the planet, Stephen Roberts from ABC News. Good morning, Stephen Roberts.
Hi, pal.
What do you make, first of all, of this North Korea and Mike Pence going over to South Korea? And an America First presidency sure is acting like a internationalist less than 100 days into his term.
I think you're correct about that, and I think the reason for that can be summed up in one word, and that word is reality. The world looks very different from the Oval Office than it did from the campaign trail. The president could make all sorts of sweeping statements, many of which were just slogans. They weren't policies. And in some ways, it's turning into an asset to his presidency that he does not have well thought out ideology and well thought out policies, because that makes him perhaps a little more flexible when reality intrudes. You take the example of North Korea is a very good one. During the campaign, he attacked China repeatedly as a manipulator of currency, as a bad trading partner, threatening trade wars. Well, over the weekend, he tweeted saying, well, I can't really do that to China anymore because I need China. It's the only avenue of any kind of leverage, economic or diplomatic, with North Korea, which clearly has growing nuclear ambitions and is seen as more of a threat, not just in its own region, but even to the United States. So a perfect example of how campaign rhetoric has to change in the face of reality. Another very good example had to do with NATO. The president repeatedly attacked NATO as obsolete during the campaign. Well, in less than 100 days, he's realized that Russia is a far more aggressive, far more expansionist power than perhaps he realized during the campaign. NATO's not obsolete at all, which is something the president has now admitted. NATO's been essential for half a century for containing Soviet expansionist ambitions. So around the world, and here at home as well, this new president is learning that the world is far more complex than it looked at from the vantage point of a candidate.
It's certainly getting high marks when it comes to foreign policy. But let's talk domestic policy, because he's making a lot of changes there, putting a lot of Democrats closer to the Oval Office. And what's shocking to me are Republicans and Republican voters and Trump voters are okay with his inner circle looking more and more Democratic and more liberal than what he ran on.
Well, again, you have to remember that this president did not run on a series of well thought out or carefully constructed plans. Now, some of his supporters had them. You know, the think tanks that backed him, Heritage and the other conservative think tanks, had very expanded and detailed plans. But Donald Trump never bought into that. Donald Trump campaign was a series of slogans. And therefore he is much more subject to influences, and he is adapting on a certain number of issues. You take another good example, the Export-Import Bank, which was an issue that a lot of conservatives brought up repeatedly and said it was crony capitalism, and an example of what was wrong with Washington subsidizing big companies trying to export American goods. Well, Trump has realized now that he's president that this is actually a very useful agency, which helps American companies compete in world markets, and that if your bottom line is jobs, exports is absolutely essential to creating American jobs. So he's changed his view on that from kind of this unthinking ideological knee-jerk reaction during the campaign to once he's in president saying, yeah, now that I've taken a second and third look at it, it really does serve a purpose. In the same way that NATO serves a purpose, the same way that China serves a purpose. There's a pattern here, right? And the pattern is, in some ways, a heartening pattern, I must say, that this president is not wedded to some of the more rigid views that he voiced during the campaign, that he's open to argument. Now that drives some of his conservative supporters crazy, but that is an evolving pattern.
How long do you think Steve Bannon has for the White House, if you believe some of your colleagues in the newsprint?
Well, Bannon is a perfect example of just what I've been talking about. Bannon has a very detailed and very rigid view of the world. He's an economic nationalist, and he talks all about deconstructing the government and the nationalist state. But Donald Trump's not an ideologue. Donald Trump adopted some of those slogans during the campaign, but he's finding that Bannon is an increasingly poor fit for his approach to the presidency. He's a much more pragmatic, transactional, deal-making character than an ideologue. A businessman, by definition, has to be a pragmatist. That's the way you succeed in business. You don't succeed as an ideologue. And so I think Bannon has been downgraded in part because his approach to politics does not fit with the way that Donald Trump is increasingly approaching his presidency. Now, the other factor, of course, is that Bannon made a serious mistake by getting in a fight with one of Donald Trump's relatives, his son-in-law, Jared Kushner. If we know anything about Donald Trump, we know how fiercely loyal he is to his own family. After all, you got to remember, he started in business as a young associate of his own father. He's put his two sons in charge of the empire while he's president. He's relied heavily on his daughter and son-in-law for advice. And Steve Bannon made a fatal mistake if he thought somehow he was going to displace Trump's children as his chief advisor.
That is Stephen Roberts, the best in the business. Stephen, have a good day. Thanks for checking in.
Okay, pal.
You got
Sure.
it. Stephen Roberts, ABC News political analyst. Good stuff. It's almost like I was just going to make the analogy to, what was it, Braveheart with King Lionheart, right? And the son, right? He killed everyone else and hated the son, but he was still defending the son because he was his son, right? Family trumps everything and palace intrigue. 7:57.